Good morning, everyone. I wonder what pops up in your mind when I introduce you with the term e-health. Some of you may think about online collection of medical records, or some of you may have heard about doctors in Nepal and tiny villages in Nepal who are communicating with colleague doctors in Boston about one of their heart patients. Or some of you may have heard how doctors are being educated by using online tools. And maybe others of you may be familiar with friends or relatives who are using mHealth, mobile health. More and more people nowadays are using mobile health to get access to health service and information by using mobile phones, tablet computers, and PDAs, often tailored to their own health condition. On a larger scale, e-health is breaking down barriers, enabling health service providers to work more closely together, even in other countries. In Europe, that's becoming more and more evident. Recently, a European task force on e-health has been created, and they were told to redesign health in Europe by 2020. Now, the chair of this e-health task force confessed last year, we know that in healthcare we lag at least 10 years behind virtually every other area in the implementation of IT solutions. And having seen the previous talks, I'm quite convinced about that. But nevertheless, e-health is around us and it's becoming more important in the near future. Now, as a psychologist, I'm mainly interested in what we call e-mental health, how mental health can be improved via the internet. More and more people are relying on the internet to explore information about mental health. And more internet technology is being used to treat psychological problems such as depression. And many of the standard protocols that have been developed for depression or anxiety can be adapted and offered in an e-health intervention. And many clients find it easier to get access to such self-help online intervention than seeking help from a real therapist. Now, let's take a look at how e-mental health may improve the disorder like depression. So I'm asking you to just dive into the field of psychology with me for just a little while, and then I'll show how it can apply to e-health. Well, in Belgium, currently, 10 in 100 Belgians are suffering from depressive symptoms. That's quite a big number. What's important, though, and even more staggering, is the prediction by the World Health Organization that by 2020, depression will be the most common illness in the Western world, even above heart failure. When we look at figures of burnout, we see that 14% of employees are currently suffering from symptoms of burnout. Now, to give you an idea, the percentage of burnout from 2010 to 11 has increased with 11%. And when someone then has a burnout, on average, they are absent at work 189 days. I think you all agree with me that the economical costs of burnout and depression are huge, and that we all have to think about creating new interventions to treat these disorders. Now, what if you, all of you, everyone here in this room, could improve their mental state? Everyone from now and then must have some negative feelings. What if I tell you that everyone in this room can improve their own mental, emotional state, their own brain? From psychological research, we know that you can. You can improve your brain, you can make your brain stronger, you can improve your performance, and have much more awareness of life. Recently, scientists in Stockholm, in Professor Torkel Klingberg's group, gave people some computer exercises. the kind of exercises you're familiar with, like a Sudoku or solving a crossword puzzle, only slightly different. For 1 month, the people were following these computer exercises, and these exercises are tapping what we call in psychology one's working memory, one's attentional span, how someone can focus. Now, after 1 month of these computer exercises, the people were, of course, better at these exercises, but they were also better able to reason and to solve problems. And this was the case with young children, but also with those over age 65. And when the researchers put these people in the brain scanner, they could see drastic changes after 1 month of brain training, especially here in their frontal lobe, where more connectivity was evident. Recently, in my research lab in Rotterdam, we examined whether such a brain training can also have an effect on someone's mental state. And that's why we invited people with depression or anxiety symptoms to perform at home an online brain training. This is one of the examples. I'll show you that, for example, people at some point have to remember the location in the grid, or they have to remember the sound that they heard, the letter they heard. And it starts with that they have to think 1 step back. When they get that right, they have to think 2 steps back, and then remember 3 steps back, 4 steps, 5 steps. So it may seem a little bit difficult at first, but people get really good at it. And these simple brain training exercises have the potential to improve someone's working memory capacity, and maybe in depressed people also how they direct their attention to negative information, and eventually it may have the potential to reduce depressive symptoms in these people. So it's clear that simple online exercises have the potential to add to e-health interventions of depression. And more researchers are thinking about how we can employ mobile technology for interventions of depression. Now imagine that your mobile phone is able to influence your emotional state. Now, aside from depression, more and more researchers are looking into how we can develop other interventions for another major problem in our society, and that is anxiety. At the moment, unfortunately, we cannot open a newspaper without being confronted with cases of childhood sexual abuse. The past weeks, we here in Belgium could read about the cruel acts that 2 parents acted upon their 4 children in Wallonia: rape, humiliation, and even almost suffocation to death. And the crucial question is, what happens to these kids and to the victims of a traumatic event such as childhood abuse, and how can we apply our e-health methods to that? Now, what people mostly experience is depression, anxiety, and if you see here, the prevalence of childhood sexual abuse is quite common, even in boys and girls. These boys and girls later on report symptoms of depression, anxiety, and what we call in psychology a post-traumatic stress disorder. It is an anxiety disorder that some people develop after having encountered a traumatic event, such as childhood abuse. Many of the people who have such a disorder report that they often re-experience a traumatic event. It is as if they're being pulled back to the traumatic event over and over again, uncontrollably. Now, the logic reaction to such a re-experience is avoidance. People avoid everything that has to do with the traumatic event. Now, if you're avoiding the very thing that is making you afraid, you will never get over what is making you afraid. So people re-experience the traumatic event that elicits anxiety, they therefore avoid again, and people will never be able to process what they have encountered. Because of these issues with re-experiencing and how difficult that is for survivors, we thought, together with my colleague Willem Paul Brinkman from the Technical University of Delft, Delft to create a virtual reality therapy for these abuse survivors, allowing them to re-experience the traumatic event. Now, in this program, which entailed a program that they could do at home, online, for 1 month, including 8 sessions, and people were asked to come up with specific memories. First, we taught them how they have to get specific memories about a neutral event, positive event, negative event, and finally we worked with them on the traumatic event. And as you can see, people could insert specific days that they remembered from their childhood. They could insert pictures, documents, links to websites, have a map where the abuse occurred, everything to have them create a very specific memory about the traumatic event. And in one of the final sessions, we even asked them to create the space, the environment where the abuse took place. For example, this could have been in a bedroom, and people could, at home, online, create the bedroom where the abuse occurred, inserting doors, windows, furniture, and even the people who were involved at the time of the childhood abuse. And with this online environment that they created, they could get a helicopter overview, they could zoom in and out, everything in order to give them a full re-experience of this very traumatic event. And what's important with this online tool is that people could do it at their own pace. They could elaborate as much as they wanted. And most of them felt very responsible for finalizing the therapy because they actively decided to enroll themselves. Now, this has been just the first study with these abuse survivors, but the results to us were fantastic. After just 1 month of this virtual reality therapy, the abuse survivors, the majority of them did not report symptoms of post-traumatic stress or depression anymore. So clearly, many more studies have to follow, but it is giving us hope about the usefulness and the effectiveness that a virtual reality therapy may have. I hope in these few minutes that I've been able to show you that e-health has a lot of potential to tackle psychological problems that are surfacing much more in our society nowadays. But what will be important as well is how we can prevent these psychological problems. And then we have to think about e-prevention. And I believe that e-prevention has the capacity to create a generation that is a lot more resilient, shows a lot more stamina when facing problems. Think back about the brain training I briefly showed you. Think if we could train brain strength in our children. In the United States, a recent project using a brain training showed the potential benefit of training our children. As you may know, in the United States, everyone has to pass, as a kid, national exams. And in the disadvantaged areas, the majority of them fail to pass these exams. Now, part of these disadvantaged areas recently received a brain training, an online brain training, and nowadays the majority of those now did pass their exams. So it clearly shows also potential benefits of creating a stronger, more resilient generation. So briefly, I believe as a scientist that e-health has a lot of potential for improving our society, and hope you can reminisce as well about how your knowledge on technology may create bridges with healthcare and mental health care. Thank you.